So this looks at another type of question that we could have related to using the empirical rule. We know the distribution of weights for a sample of 1,400 cargo containers is somewhat normally distributed. The standard deviation is 120. Based on the empirical rule, we want to figure out, really the question we want to ask ourselves is, of the 1,400 containers, how many will have a weight between the mean and the mean plus one standard deviation. The value of the standard deviation doesn't matter at all for the question. What's important is that we're trying to figure out, right, how many will have a weight between the mean and the mean plus one standard deviation. The reason how this uses the empirical rule is our empirical rule tells us how many would have a weight between the mean minus one standard deviation and the mean plus one standard deviation. We've done similar questions like that before, right? We know that there is 68% of the data that falls in that range. And now, since we actually want between the mean and the mean plus one standard deviation, we can use the symmetry of the normal distribution to figure out that percent. So if 68% is one standard deviation on either side, then half of that, half of 68% is 34%. We'd have 34% of the values between the mean and the mean plus one standard deviation. So now the question that was asked, of 1,400 containers, how many will have a weight between the mean and the mean plus one standard deviation? Well, it'll always be 34% of the total. And in this case, our total, we know that there's 1,400 containers. So if we solve this proportion, we'll get the answer. Solving the proportion gives us a value of 476. Therefore, 476 cargo containers can be expected to have weights between the mean and the mean plus one standard deviation. Excellent. So that concludes our introduction to the empirical rule, and hopefully it does give you a sense about how our probabilities are calculated for things other than standard normal distribution, but for any normal distributions, for any mean, or standard deviation. Okay, so you should be ready to do the 8D notes now, and I'll see you in class. Bye.